Welcome to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and I'm going to introduce you to the creators who give fear its voice. Together, we'll explore the strange, the unsettling, and the unforgettable. So go ahead and dim those lights because that conversation starts now. Hello and welcome back to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and I am joined once again by this amazing writer and filmmaker, Mark Steensland. His incredible body of work moves between film and prose, and it feels like to me this guy is always searching for what darkness can seem to reveal about character. And about belief and about choices that people make. And this new book from Mark is just another angle on all of those interests. And this new book by Mark is another angle on all of those interests. And I'm looking forward to digging into exactly how he built this story and the world inside of it. So welcome back to the show, Mark, and this amazing book, the Black Magic Murders.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. It's a real pleasure.
I loved this book so much. It's got this great hook to it. You talked about it in our previous conversation, but I'm not going to try and explain. I'm going to let you set it up. So let's just start with that. Tell us what the book is about and the big hook to it, because I just love
it. Okay. Well, I hope we're talking about the same thing. So this is fictional true crime, which is what I hope is going to be my corner of the world in dramatic storytelling now. And that means that I have come up with a completely fictional story, but I am treating it as if it is a true crime book, as if it is a nonfiction account of this event. And so that means that there's facts of things that were happening in the news kind of around the time that the story is supposedly taking place. And it means that that's the way it's supposed to feel is at one of these nonfiction true crime books, especially. I mean, some of those things from maybe your grocery store check stand kind of quickie book kind of thing was a vibe that I was definitely going for with this one. So this one is about a case in San Francisco in 1970 where a guy who says that he is a devil worshiper is a suspect in a murder, and the homicide inspector's partners go to talk to him, and basically he confesses to them right in the first interview and says, yes, I did it. I killed this guy, but I used black magic and you'll never be able to prove it. And so this kind of sets these two detectives then on this path of, what do we do? How can we convict this guy or get the evidence against this guy? Because there are some mysterious circumstances. And one of the partners is a devoted Catholic and believes strongly that this guy is telling the truth about being in league with Satan. The other guy is an atheist and thinks that there must be some kind of concrete scientific explanation for what he's doing and how he's doing it. And so as their investigation progresses, then this source of tension is going back and forth and getting wound up tighter and tighter as it proceeds. So
well, I love it. And the atheist is from my neck of the woods and has a very interesting sort of backstory there. And as I was reading it, I was like, yep, I never experienced that growing up in North Carolina, but I know a lot of people who did. So yeah. For sure. Yeah. But I would love to know, what was sort of the first spark for you for this story? What led you to want to tell this story this way and pushed you towards writing this book?
That is a really good question. And I think just as I have lots and lots of ideas that are at different stages of development, and I keep file folders full of things, whether it's just a simple sort of log line kind of idea, 25 words or something, or maybe it's even a title, or maybe it's whatever. And so then I develop these things as I'm working along. If I get stuck on something, I move on to something else. And I'm not quite sure. I mean, I've always been a true crime person. I think I shared in our last interview that my fifth grade career report was I want to be a homicide detective. And so, I really have kind of a love of that particular world. Um, Also, as a journalist, having the experience of writing journalism and interviewing real people and writing real stories and so forth is also something that, again, I have a lot of experience with and I like for a lot of reasons. And and I think there was just sort of this idea of, I'd like to write a true crime book, but I have to find a crime that's worthy of writing a book about it. And usually those things are already taken by somebody else or whatever. And then I don't know, I guess that there was just something about, well, you could make up your own crime and you could write it that way. And it also allowed me to introduce this paranormal element, which is something that I'm also very interested in, which is, of course, why I love horror so much. And so thinking about things like the Amityville Horror, for instance, which was published as a nonfiction account of what had happened to these people. And, of course, we have different versions of that, of the truth of that story now, and so forth. And so it just kind of got me thinking about that possibility, and knowing that I was going to approach it in this fact-based sort of way, then allowed me to pick a time and a place that I was really interested in. And I love San Francisco. It's my favorite city in the world. I love the 1970s because I grew up during that time. And so deciding on 1970 San Francisco, this is a really interesting milieu, and especially for a case like this. And to be honest, I wrote like a portion of the first chapter, and at the very beginning, I was a little bit scared because I'm like, am I going to be tricking people in a bad way? Am I going to be like
No.
doing something that people are going to believe this, and then there's going to be kind of problems around that. And so I pulled back a little bit, and then I kind of came around, and I did have what you just said. No, I kind of had, yes, that's true. It's not going to be like that. We're in on it, and that's part of why it's effective and why it's fun. And people who have read it have said to me that it's so convincing that they have had to stop and go and Google things and like make sure. A person at a publishing house who is looking at the book right now did write to me a few days after I submitted and said, "I'm just making sure this is fiction, right?" and so I've really felt like, okay, I nailed what I was trying to do. So, and again, I think I shared this the last time, the discovery process of how well this connected to all of my, all of the things that have made me who I am. It's really the first time I felt like this is a really full expression of who I am as a writer, as an artist, and so forth, so.
I mean, I feel like you've already answered. You just answered this question beautifully. I don't know how you can expand on it, but I'm just gonna ask. Like, you've talked about the fact that this mixes true crime with the occult and with the supernatural, and just wondering, like, what made that combination absolutely the right engine for this story instead of leaning fully into either one or the other genre. And again, you've talked about this. I think you answered the question per se, but what I guess I wanted to say was part of going off what you were saying earlier is like there's so much in this that I actually, having spoken to you and talked about this before I even read the book and knowing it, and I'm still like, wait a minute, is this true? Like I'm still doing it because it's just done in such a way that it really, like, if you didn't know better, even knowing better, I was still questioning it. I was like, oh God, is this really true? Yeah, so
well,
that's part of some of the questions I have for you today. Too. Some specifics into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as why the paranormal thing was really the way to go here is, again, because not only it's an interest of mine, but also because I think questions about belief are so interesting. And so sometimes stories will take, what we call the Scooby-Doo approach, which is you have the paranormal, something happening, and then at the end, oh, look, it's this guy in a mask, it's Mr.
Yep.
Jones, or whatever. And there's this explanation for everything that was happening. No, there is no paranormal thing. There is nothing supernatural. It's just people. And so that's one way to go. The other way to go is where you say, no, there absolutely is supernatural. Supernatural is real and all of this kind of stuff. And of course, both of those positions then are going to, in a certain sense, be against half of the audience, so to speak, because the people who don't believe in the supernatural, sure, they're going to feel this way. The people who do are going to feel this way. And I thought I have this really interesting opportunity to present both sides in a way and not really come down on one or the other, because I'm treating it as a true crime thing, right? There isn't an explanation. It could be, but maybe there is this other sort of explanation. And I never wanted to take a position on that. I wanted to leave that for the reader really to determine. And so knowing that then really has led me into some very interesting places with what I'm planning on the future. And I think I shared this last time, is that I'm working on something. The next one I'm working on is set in the Satanic Panic. And that was the big issue in the Satanic Panic, is whether we believed these things were happening or not. And the power of belief in influencing people to make certain kinds of decisions and so forth. And especially when you're talking about life and death, or going to jail for 20 years or whatever it happens to be, these are big issues, and I think important issues. And it was something that I really wanted to deal with thematically.
One of the things I really want to talk about too is format for just a minute. And what I mean by that is that you play with true crime conventions here. You do something that I absolutely loved, and you just did it right away. The use of footnotes and sort of this almost like this documentary feel, like that's how I was sort of envisioning it as I was reading, because I do that a lot. I put it on screen, and I'm like, how would this play out if I were watching it in real life? And it's got a very documentary feel to it. I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about what guided your decisions about which conventions to lean into, and if any, which ones to break as you shaped this narrative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have read a lot of true crime, but once I decided that I was going to commit to this, then I started extensive reading in the genre. So I got some super well-known, well-respected classics and read those, and found a lot of those old grocery check stand quickies and read those, and just was really absorbing how different writers approach things depending on their voice, what sort of narrative distance, how were they dramatizing, and there's all kinds of examples out there. And I just was trying to decide which of those do I think fits best for what I was doing. And it really was kind of finding my way the first time with the Black Magic Murders. I mean, I really was experimenting a lot along the way before I started to feel comfortable with what the end result was. And the footnotes were one of those things, is that I was trying to get some piece of information into the main portion of the manuscript, and I'm like, I can't make this fit. And then I thought, well, I should just put a footnote, because that's something that these books do. And when I put the footnote in, then I realized, oh, I can do this. And I went back to the front of the manuscript and just started looking for all these places that I had left information out that I wanted to include. And then going forward, I started looking for information that I could include as footnotes. And so a lot of that ended up being fact-based, of course, about real people or real events. But I also had a lot of fun with putting footnotes in about things that were in the world of the story that weren't, that aren't true, obviously, that are fiction. And, maybe for some people who have some really sharp eyes. Maybe there are some Easter eggs to other kinds of things, that are connected in some way to the story. And that was, again, it was just one of those things. I mean, like, for example, the photo section, I knew that I wanted
want
a
to talk
photo
about this.
section.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I knew right from the start, I'm going to put photos in this because that's going to really be different. That's going to be the thing that's going to make this very different. If I lean that hard into it, I think it's going to be really unique. And so that was a process also, because I had some limited ideas and I was kind of playing with those. And then once it started to get serious, like, okay, this book is going to be published. What are you going to really do in that section? And so it took a long time to get access to the photos that I wanted to use from stock places, from stock libraries and so on, and also to create the photos that I was creating as well and get that all combined. So yeah, I mean, I think that was a really big thing. One thing I think probably that wasn't something that I had seen in some other true crime books was the integration of the music from the period. And
You did that very well too. I will say it was one of my favorite things is how you tied it to all of these different moments, very in a very nice, neat sort of it just laid in perfectly.
Well, good. Thank you for saying so, because it was a very conscious effort. And I love music. Music is really important to me in my artistic process and my writing process. And so as I started to build these ideas about what I was going to do, then that was something that became a structural sort of thing. And then to build the playlist, which is printed at the end of the book and then also is available on Spotify. If you go to the website, there's a link to that playlist on Spotify. And then that became a really super important element for this thing that I'm working on now, where I've even leaned harder into that, because of course the Satanic Panic was to a large extent dealing with music of the period and its influence and so forth. So yeah, that's just, again, one of those other things, I think.
So I want to go back to the image gallery real quick. And you talked about using stock images in some places. In some places, I assume you created your own images. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process. I love the fact that you included this image gallery in the book and where it was. It was something fun to look forward to. I knew it was coming. We talked about it. So of course, I'm flipping ahead. I'm like, oh, okay, I've got 50 pages till I get there. Okay, I now got 10. So it was kind of a countdown for me to kind of get to that. It was kind of fun.
One of the funny things is, and a couple of my beta readers were like, shouldn't the photos sort of be scattered throughout the book? And I was like, no, the books that I'm riffing on, they always had them in the center. And one of the things that always happened is they included these photos in the center of the book, and half the photos were from the first half and half the photos were from the second half. And if you looked at the photos and you read the captions, it was like spoilers. And so I absolutely did that on purpose, because I was wanting to, again, really recreate this feeling of what those books were like. It was a very complicated process, not just finding pictures that worked, but finding pictures that worked that I could then license. And so that was really challenging. And the credits, of course, in the back indicate how many different sources I had to employ in order to do that. And that's in addition, again, to the photos that I created. And as we can see back here, this image, which, as I think I shared before, the artist Vanessa McKee, I hired her to draw this police sketch of the eyewitness report of the supposed demon that committed the first murder, and had the idea of what I wanted, and then worked with her to produce that image so that I could bring it in and create this fake wanted poster that supposedly the other detectives made as a joke and all that kind of stuff, and include, in the image gallery. So yeah, a lot of effort there.
That was fun to see. The for lack of a better term, the posing of the bodies was another favorite of mine. So I assume those were created by you.
Two were, one was a stock photo, and then two were created by me. One is me.
I was wondering, that was my question. Which one is you?
Yeah, I'm Malcolm Dorrance. And then a friend of mine, not a co-writer, but a writer friend of mine is the model for one of the other victims. And ironically, that person is Gary Wilbanks, is a retired police officer. And he had actually, in his law enforcement career, he had actually participated in a situation where he had to pretend to be a corpse. And so when I asked him to do this, and he's like, oh, I actually have experience with that. So we really had a lot of fun with that. But yeah, I mean, San Francisco Library was a terrific source for a lot of the stock photos that were from that location and from that time period. And that's a critical element for, again, contributing to the believability of the whole thing.
And one small thing, not related to any questions that I have to ask, but I just thought about it as we were talking about the photos. The Transamerica building,
Yes.
that reference, and in that time frame, never even thought about it until I read it. I'm like, what a great little friggin' detail, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a great little detail. And then to have that photo, because it just, for me, for as long as I've been going to San Francisco, that building's always been there.
Right.
And so it just to sort of have that in the story in the way that it was. And again, just to be clear, it's not integral to the story in any way, shape, or form, other than the fact that it's just there. And
right.
it serves as kind of a timepiece in a way. But
yeah, I mean, David Fincher did something with that in a similar fashion in his film version of Zodiac, where he had the time lapse sequences of the Transamerica pyramid being constructed that he used sort of, I think, throughout the film. And and it's like, okay, yeah, you saw that in Zodiac and now you put it in your book. Well, it was actually being built in 1970, when these people are supposedly working on this case. So it did become a thing that I discovered while I was doing my research for the book, and especially some of the background about how hated the building was by people who lived in San Francisco at the time. And now, of course, we consider it an iconic skyline, and that's an important part of San Francisco's iconic skyline, as you said. Yeah, I mean, again, all of those sorts of things, and me trying to work in things that I knew about, but maybe only knew a little bit about. And so then research revealed other information, like the Clown Alley restaurant.
Yep.
And it turns out, there's a whole feud between these people who had competing Clown Alley restaurants that just was fascinating for me, because I'm an information junkie, and again, I think my journalistic background, and so again, this is why this fits so well. But so much fun to read about all that stuff and figure out how can I put it in.
It's great. It's great. So I want to kind of go back to what we were talking about, just a touch on just a little bit ago about what's real and what's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know this entire story is fiction, but I gotta say your forward and your afterward in this thing suggests that it ties to real events in some way. So I have to ask, did the context, how did that context sort of shape the book's center of gravity, I guess, if you will? Okay. And well, this is a two-part question, but I kind of want to know, are they real? Are they in any way, shape, or form tied to even loosely? Because
no.
I was like, oh my God, I feel like this is a question I have to ask. I'm not going to Google it. I'm not going to dig into it. I'm going to let him tell me, because it was all I could think about was just the way it sort of bookends the thing in such a these are events that happened, and this is how I documented it. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, and that was part of the commitment of this particular style. And for me, stories are the most important way we have at telling each other the truth. And so it's really important to me to know what are the truths that I'm dealing with, whether it's stuff about the human condition or emotional insights that I may have had in my life that I that have worked and I want to share, and all that kind of stuff. You can't start there. If you start there, you end up with the ABC after school special like Leadfoot, where let's make a movie about how bad drunk driving is. And that's putting theme first, and that's a big mistake. And you always have to put entertainment first. You always have to think the top priority is entertaining the audience. That's the number one thing. And you commit everything to that idea first. But it's also true, I think, that things that are entertaining, that there can be wonderful, but the things that we repeat are things that have more depth of some kind to them. And, I've heard somebody call these kinds of things like living texts. And that's this idea that as you grow and change and you go back and you read this thing, that thing changes too, because now you're aware of different insights that this person had or whatever. And just, crazy example, for instance, for me is David Lynch's Eraserhead, which is incredibly entertaining to me. And I loved it when I was younger, and I love to watch it over and over again. But I'll tell you what, after I had children, it was a completely different movie, and I had a completely different response to it. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about in terms of things that tell a truth of a certain kind and that you can have access to through that story. So when I say the story is all fiction, it's not based on any real people or whatever, I'm still hoping that I'm tapping into truths about the human condition and about the influence of belief and about what that means in terms of the way that we live our lives and all of those kinds of things. And so hopefully, you're entertained, first of all, but you also get this other stuff out of it and maybe go back and read it again and get something new out of it.
My favorite part is reading it and picking up on what you missed the first time.
Yeah.
So the second part of that question for me is like, which part of this story was the hardest for you to land as you built it?
Oh, that's a good question. I outline extensively. So I am definitely, that's where I'm writing the story is, I come up with the idea, and the hook really was the first part of the idea was what if, and I had this hook for a long time before I decided to do it as a true crime thing. What if there was a murder and homicide guys went to interview the guy, and the guy said, yeah, I did it, and I used black magic. Because that's easily a horror novel, right? I could have left all of the true crime stuff off and I think still have an effective novel. And for me, the true crime stuff just adds to it. But I had that hook, and so I was sort of thinking about that. And then obviously you start thinking, well, okay, but what happens next, and where am I going with this, and how is it going to end, and all those sorts of things. And that's the work that I'm doing in the outline. And so I have a lot of experience as a screenwriter. I teach screenwriting. My master's degree is in screenwriting. And so screenwriting is all about structure to a certain extent. And I was taught by some really, really good teachers like Paul Galino at Chapman University, who taught a way that really resonated with me in terms of structuring stories. And so I use that for everything that I do. When I write a stage play, a short story, a short film, a novel, I'm going back to those kinds of structural things. And Aristotle believed that plot was the most important element in dramatic storytelling. And for Aristotle, plot meant the arrangement of the story events. And that's really what you're talking about. So you need to know what they are. You need to know what order they go in. And as much as I can outline and as much as I can do all that stuff, you still run into things when you're drafting. You're like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, I didn't quite think that all the way through. And again, that's just part of the process because, you're doing this different thing with it. And I guess your question about what was the hardest part to land, boy, as much as I want to say that I was so confident, like, this is going to work, I also was continuously doubtful of this isn't going to work. And just trying to sustain that and always trying to find what can I do that's different from what my first thought is, you know? And like, I think of an example, not to spoil anything, but there's a priest character who tells a story from their own past. And I really struggled with that because my first impulse was, oh, I'm just going to tell this standard exorcism story because, you know, that's what it should be. And then I realized we've heard that. We've heard that so many times. I don't want to do that. And so it took a long time to figure out what's a story that I can tell that functions in the way that it needs to function here, but also is something different. And that one felt pretty good when I finished that section. You know, I felt like I got what I was trying to do. So it's always a struggle. And
I think that moment pays off too, actually, honestly, in another part of the story that made it flow very well, that particular moment you're talking about. So whatever struggle you went with and putting that together, I'm talking very vague because it is a big spoiler and you know what it is, but when we get to another point in the story, the way that is just like, I'm with you, let's go, was just, oh, yeah, this makes sense now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So,
yeah.
Sorry, that was very vague, but you get it.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm kind of curious then, to that point and to that end, was there a moment in writing this that kind of surprised you, like, or maybe shifted the story in a different direction that you weren't expecting?
Well, it's a little, that happens during the outline. And so, because again, that's when I'm really putting all these things together. I'm deciding where those reversals are going to be, you know, where this is supposed to be a shocking, surprising moment. I'm planning that in the outline stage of my writing process. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, you kind of encounter some of those sorts of things and you think, okay, that works. I like that. That's a good idea. Let's put that in and see whether that fits the flow. And that's why I do it at the outline stage, because, you know, if I was writing pages and pages and pages of stuff and then ended up against a wall and had to throw all that out and go back to go a different direction or whatever, to me, I just don't want to work that way. It's a lot easier when I have, my outlines are generally, like for this book, I think it was probably 13 to 15 single space pages or something like that, you know, and that's usually about where I end up. And so
that's a lot.
Well, I mean, you know,
I mean, maybe not for you, but like in people that I've talked to, that's quite a bit for an outline. I think it's great, but I tend to get, I think 80% of the people I talk to don't outline a lot. And I love that you do that. So that's fantastic.
And I understand it's a different approach. Pantsers love to do what they're doing, and they say that's how they find surprises in the story and keep it interesting and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm a planner. I'm a planner in everything. So it makes sense that I do it there as well. So yeah, I mean, I really can't say anything about what surprised me really without spoiling it.
Revealing the surprise, right?
Yeah, but there were a couple of moments that were very satisfying. And of course, you know, you're dealing with a mystery to a certain extent, and it's always challenging to make sure you're keeping all of the clues realistic and connected, and you want to make sure that they all pay off in the right way and everything. And there was a point late in the book where I was like, okay, you know, do I really have everything connected the way that I think I do? And it was a great relief to find out, yes, okay, yes, I did do all of that correctly, and the foundation is there. So yeah, so it worked out well. But there were a number of sequences in the book that I conceived separately from where they occur in the outline. Oh, I want to have this happen to this character. I want this character to do this thing or whatever. And so knowing that I wanted to do that, then you're plotting and then you're figuring out, now where does that
how do we get there
thing go? Yeah.
So my favorite question to always ask is, what scene or moment in the book are you most excited for readers to experience, and why that one? But before you answer that one, I get to tell you mine.
Okay.
Mine is a huge spoilers. So again, I'm going to do what I just did, and I'm going to talk in code. It's going to be very vague, but you'll know what it is. I'm just going to say it's the moment that Frank takes Will to church with him and his family, and that entire scene. I don't know why it shocked me, but it came out of left field for me for some reason. I think because of
Good.
where we are in the story.
Good.
And I was like, holy crap. I almost said another word here that I would have to bleep out, but I was like, holy crap. And it kind of freaked me out. So that was, I think, there were a lot of great moments, but I think at the end of the day, that was the one that really just got me.
Okay, good. Yeah, and that's exactly the way that I hope that works for everybody. That was the plan. And so that's good to hear. I think probably one of the things that I knew I wanted to do and then was very pleased with the way it ended up is when Will is on his own sort of tailing a suspect, and we have a really interesting diversion that Will experiences as a result of what happens. And that was something that I really wanted to do, and I really wanted to get it right. And several other people have told me they really thought that was effective, and I really like it, so yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite things.
Is that, I'm not gonna spoil it afterwards, is that the 3-letter one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. We'll leave it at that.
Yes.
All right, great. All right, perfect. All right, so you've already answered this question a little bit, a couple of times already, but what's next for Lucifer's Fork, if you will? Like, is there more going on with Lucifer's Fork, or are we done with that? And we're gonna, like, the next book that you're working on, is that a completely different?
Yes, yeah, completely different. So I really intend everything to be as standalone as possible, because one of the things that I have seen happen is that writers get caught in a series, committing to a series. And look, if it works for you, if you love your characters and the environment and all that kind of stuff, it's wonderful. But also that feels a little bit restrictive to me in some areas. Like, I did what I wanted to do with Frank and Will in this story. And to me, trying to write another case that they're on would be more of the same. Like, they're going to have the same arguments. They're going to have the same kind of stuff going on. I was more interested in saying, okay, I did that with this place and this time, and what can I do now? So I have several other titles that I'm working on, planning in the same fictional true crime thing. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, this one that I'm drafting right now is set partly in the Satanic Panic and then partly 25 years after the Satanic Panic, and involves a case, obviously, that is related to the Satanic Panic back in the late 80s. And so it's similar, obviously, in that it's going to be like a true crime story, and that it's going to have these sort of paranormal elements. It's going to deal with the similar sorts of issues and so on. And that's, again, also, though, standalone. I want to leave those characters in that particular book and not carry them forward. So that's really the way that I'm planning each of these things, is they'll be connected by the fact that they are these paranormal true crime things, if you will, but they'll be connected perhaps in some places where the universes are connected a little bit, So for example, in the foreword of the new book, I explain that I first found out about this Satanic Panic case from a police officer I interviewed for the Black Magic murders. So there's going to be that sort of connection, a little bit of that kind of thing, but no plans for a series.
So a bit of a crossover, no franchise, no series. Got it.
Yeah.
I don't even know if crossover is the right word, but they do touch. But yeah. So, well, cool. Yeah. The book is called The Black Magic Murders. It is the story of the untold story, rather, of Lucifer's Fork. And Mark, why don't you tell everybody how they can get the book?
So at this point, the book was only available as a special edition through a subscription box service called Nightworms. And so this is exclusive to their readers in the December box that is going to be sent out here shortly. And that box is sold out, unfortunately, for any listeners who are hoping, they might be able to get a copy or get in on that. They may have extras. Sometimes they do. In the month following, they find out, that they have a few extras on hand and they might have those for sale. But at this point, that's where it's going to come out. That's how it's going to be available. And I'm hoping to get a publisher to take it on so that we can bring it to a wider audience. So I'm actively searching for a publisher or for an agent who wants to take this particular manuscript on and help me get it with a publisher or something. So that's what we're working on.
Sweet. So where should our audience go if they want to find out more about you or more about the future of this book? Because people got to read this.
Okay. Easiest thing to do is marksteensland.com. So just my name.com. There's all the links to all my previous stuff. And at the very bottom of the page, there's links to all my social media stuff, as well as there's a link to the kind of small website for the Black Magic Murders, which is at lucifersfork.com, and has a link to the Goodreads page and to the playlist on Spotify. And you can read the first chapter of the book, which was published in Gold Badge Detective Magazine. And so if you go to goldbadgemag.com, which is also linked on that page, you can click the cover of issue 2, and they have published an excerpt from the book, which is chapter 1. So you can kind of read that at least to see how it feels.
Some of those photos too.
So. And it has some of those photos too. Now, again, Gold Badge Magazine is not a real magazine. It is something that. What's that?
That's it. It's all part of the world, right?
Yes, it's something that I created because I thought this is the kind of thing that I would hope would happen, that some magazine would pick up an excerpt. And so I created this magazine, fictional magazine. I wrote different story to publish in the first issue. And so that is also available there. That is a self-contained story, which is about 9,000 words. And then issue number 2 has this excerpt. And I suspect that issue 3 of Gold Badge Mag will have an excerpt of my Satanic Panic book. So we'll look forward to that.
I love it. And then really quickly, you have to tee this thing up because I thought it was pretty awesome. My little bookmark, which I love.
Yes. So. Show the other side.
Oh, yes. It's a body. Let's see if we can get it up
it's
there.
An evidence tag.
Body evidence tag. I love it.
Yeah. So that is,
tag, if you will.
Yeah, that is what is going to be included along with the book in the Nightworms box. That signed bookmark is again included along with that. So that's going to be the place that you'll get that. I do have some of those on hand also, and maybe be spreading those around to people like Rick.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. So I was very happy with it.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, thank you again for coming and talk to me about this book. Like I said, I loved it. I loved the idea when you first presented it to me, and I appreciate you letting me read it and talk to you about it because it's a lot of fun.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm very excited for number 3 in this series. So
thanks.
All right, you guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on Quills and Chills. Bye, guys.